welcome to Business as Usual. Today I got my co-host Christian with us. Hey Christian.
Hey, DATV viewers, just a bit of a reminder. Kevin and I, we worked out a formal agreement that I will be showing up every 10 episodes. So if you see this face on the 170th, the 180th, and maybe the 200th, then you'll know why.
Awesome. Why don't you introduce Jack then?
Yes, from Longhorn Financial, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jack Wang.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, guys.
So Jack, we want to go right in. You're seeing a lot of stuff on Facebook right now because it's graduation season. Exciting times for everybody. But
Absolutely.
What advice do you have for graduates? How do we start?
Yeah, you know, it's such a great time because right now you have all the graduations. I mean, I see the pictures also. And so there's, you know, today I want to kind of break it up into a couple sections. So we have, of course, the kids who are graduating college, right? And they're facing a different set of issues than the kids who are graduating high school, right? Who are you know, got to think about different things. And of course, really, we'll take a moment to talk about sort of kids who are still in high school, so not quite off to the college stage. So, you know, so the tips really are separate and distinct depending on which one of those phases you're in.
Yep. So how about for the people coming out of college? I want to start there, Jack, because they face a lot of burdens and stuff. So let's talk a little bit about your advice for them.
Yeah, so coming out of college is a great time. I mean, I remember when I was in college, and I'll just interject a little story here. I remember coming out of college, you know, graduating, getting a job and things like that. It was such an exciting time. And I remember thinking, this work thing is kind of hard. I should have probably flunked a few classes so I could have stayed in, right? It would have been much easier to do that. So, but seriously, really, you know, these college graduates, they're so busy finding jobs, getting settled, you know, establishing their new lives, whether it's living at home or living elsewhere. But their student loans going to be coming, not due, but the payments are going to have to start. So really, one of the key points is for these new grads to really understand what repayment plan they're on and what the dates are, because you don't want to start out of the gate with something negative. So really try and understand like what's going on with those.
So how do they know what the dates are and stuff? Because like you say, you see people, you know, it's their first payment, they kind of forget all about it. And then like you said, you know, right away we start to maybe impact their credit. So let's talk a little bit about credit.
Yeah, so one thing is obviously talk to your loan servicer, but typically, you know, either starts right away, right when you get out of school, or when they signed up for loans originally, they could have had a 6-month deferment period, which is wait for 6 months before you have to pay. One of the other things to keep to understand also is that, you know, student loans can be a burden, but they don't have to be. So you want to understand those dates, you want to make your payments on time, and the other important reason to make your payments on time is because student loans use what's called simple interest. And so the interest is calculated based on how many days since your last payment, kind of like credit cards, kind of like auto loans. So one of the tips I offer new graduates is, let's say you get a job and let's say you get paid every week. Well, take whatever your regular monthly payment would have been, but divide it weekly. So you can pay more often, and in fact, when you do that, even if your total monthly payment is still the same as what it would have been, but just because you're paying more often, interest doesn't have as much time to accrue, so you actually save some money on interest in the long term. It doesn't make a huge difference, but it does make a difference.
Absolutely.
Genius. So we know that it's important to keep one's credit clean, but the burden, as we all know, is quite high. So I got a question. What can grads do to make the experience more, what's the word, smooth, as if to say?
Yeah, so, you know, there's a lot of challenges out there. One of them is, you know, just what I talked about is making payments, you know, obviously not being late, because obviously if you're late or you have poor credit, that can affect the rest of your life, right? If you buy a car, if you go for credit cards, if you need to ultimately buy a house, what have you, right? But the other thing also is really understanding all of the different repayment plans out there. And so there really are a lot of options. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be as burdensome as one might expect out of the gate. So there are different options, and it's good to explore those.
I think it's important, Jack, because I see this happen a lot. You know, someone graduates from school and they go out and they buy a really nice car. You know, because hey, I worked hard, you know, and
Right,
I got my
right.
first job. I'm making, in their eyes, really good money.
Right.
And then you look at it and say, okay, now I get the car payment. Oh wait, you know, now I get my school loan payments, and then life gets in the way. You meet someone really special, decide you want to get married, you go to buy a house, and find out you don't qualify for anything because your debt is so high.
It's a lot to juggle.
It is a lot to juggle, absolutely. Yeah. And it's not uncommon for people to run into that, right? I mean, especially with the amount of student loans these days. I mean, and people, you know, they're making their payments, they don't think about it, and then they go to that mortgage broker or the real estate agent to try and buy that house, or maybe go to the car dealer to try and buy that car, and all of a sudden either they can't, or they say, you know, we'll sell you the car, but your interest rate's going to be, you know, umpteen%.
Sure.
And it's a shock to people. It floors them.
Jack, it really scares me when you sit down and say, Jack, I can either pay for your college or I can buy your house. Because I mean, all kidding aside, you know, with some $40,000, $50,000 a year, you're seeing kids coming out owing $100,000, $150,000. Well, it's a pretty nice down payment on a home.
Right.
And some days I look at it and go, I'll take the roof over my head, Jack. You know,
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
but like I said,
big money.
it's a real burden and stuff. So, all right. So, what else do new grads have to know?
So things like repayment plans, right? So there's so I know we were talking about that a moment ago. So there's several different options. You know, there's the regular repayment plan, which is you pay back the loan in 10 years. Now again, just as a caveat though, that 10 years also assumes that you're making payments on time, right? Because if you make late payments, extra interest will accrue, so it might take longer than 10 years. So there's that. Then there's what's called graduated repayment. Graduated repayment is really the payments start out lower and then they go up over time. The idea being that over time you're going to get raises, you're going to get promoted, you're going to get a different job, so you can handle that payment. Danger there is, of course, people start out with that low payment, right? I mean, in banking, you know, buy a loan, buy a car, right? People just want to know what the payment is, and if they get an extra low payment, they end up spending the extra money on other stuff, right? The new car or furnishings or new wardrobe, whatever, and then all of a sudden the payment goes up down the road, and all of a sudden they're shocked because they've been spending this money. There's also what's called income-based repayment, or I'm sorry, extended repayment, which stretches the payment out over 25 years, kind of like a mortgage. And then there's also income-based repayment, which is anywhere between 10 and 15% of your income. And again, the payback period is about 20 to 25 years. So there are a lot of different options out there. And so, you know, new grads need to figure out sort of which one they're on and which one should they be on, right? It's really two different questions.
Yeah, and speaking of should, this is for all you confused DATV viewers out there. Which one should people take? I mean, is there like a certain set of which they like have like a certain choosing, or like which one?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I hate to say it depends, but it really does depend. There's personal circumstances, there's jobs, and even things like what kind of job they do. So people often say, well, take the shorter time, you'll pay less interest over time, and that's true, but that also means payments are higher. So if they have a real stable job, steady job, they're making good money, then maybe that makes sense. But on the flip side, maybe they're like a commissioned salesperson, right? So their income's all over the place. Well, you might, in that situation, you might want to go with that longer repayment, because just get that lower monthly payment, because if you have a bad month, you might not have money to pay that payment, right? You can always prepay it off in advance. Doesn't mean you have to wait 25 years, but you don't want to give yourself this really high burden that you have to, you know, this monthly nut you have to cover, and you might not make the money, right? So it kind of depends on that kind of stuff as well.
Well, we know it didn't take 25 years to make this show.
So, can you change your mind, Jack? So if I start off on one payment plan, can I change to another one?
You actually can, right? And there's different consolidation options and switching repayment plans. The one thing is, I know we'll talk a little about this later, but there are pros and there are cons to consolidating and switching payment plans, because it can impact certain things down the road.
Genius. So one thing that's been piquing my curiosity for the past now 18 minutes is, what about loan forgiveness? Like, how does that work?
So that kind of ties in with the change in repayment plan. So there's all sorts of loan forgiveness, because, you know, like you said, Kevin, earlier, you know, so many kids are graduating with huge debt amounts, you know, 100,000, 150,000. I mean, even 30,000, right? That's still a lot of money.
Absolutely.
Right? So people often think, well, if I work this job, maybe I get loan forgiveness, whatever. So there's a couple different programs, for teachers, for public service, if you work in sort of governmental or nonprofits, sort of emergency personnel, police, fire, things like that. They all have their different nuances. But one thing, though, about refinancing or consolidating is one of the main conditions is you have to make 10 years worth of payments. But if you refinance or consolidate, if you are 1 month short of that 10 years and then you refinance, that time, that clock resets. So you have to do another 10 years before you're eligible.
That's tough.
So loan forgiveness can be very good, but you also have to make sure you don't kill your own eligibility because you did something else.
It's also important for people, if I understand that right, if someone says, well, I'm going to declare bankruptcy because I just can't afford these payments, you can't discharge student loans in bankruptcy, right? Right.
For the most part, you can't. There is a very, very small sort of opening in the law that, and I'm not the expert on this, but I know that there's a very small opening where you actually can do it, but you have to meet certain conditions and really show a good faith effort. They try to make the payments and everything else. But for the most part, the federal government has been very tough to sort of taken a very tough stance to allow that to happen. So we'll see what happens when the new administration gets into office. Maybe they'll change, maybe it won't. It's one of those things, I wouldn't hang your hat on it, right?
Absolutely.
Or as the saying is, don't hold your breath, because probably not going to change.
Yep.
Yeah, and speaking of administration, I mean, not every person has always the same thing, but I mean, the one thing that's really been confusing me as a high school student, like, what about teachers? I mean, like, are they into this or are they not? I mean, is it like a split or something?
Yeah, so when it comes to loan forgiveness for teachers, there is a program for teachers, and the basic rule of thumb is you have to work for 5 years, but in a low income community. So I'll give you an example. So my wife works in the town of Lexington as a teacher. Not exactly a low income community. So she is not even remotely close to getting student loan forgiveness, right? But if you work in a low income community as defined by the federal government, so presumably Lowell will be one, and some other communities, then as long as you do 5 years in that type of community, then you would meet one of the main criteria for being able to do it. The other thing is you have to teach full time. So sometimes you're like just a specialist, or you're teaching sort of half-time or whatever, right, during the school year. That does not qualify. You have to do 5 years worth of full-time work to get in.
That's a really smart idea, though, Jack, because unfortunately, you come out of school with some level of debt, and your first temptation, obviously, is go make as much money as you can.
Right.
Well, then you look at things like teachers in communities that really need teachers. Well, you're looking at saying, well, they probably can't afford to pay what a nicer, more affluent communities to what I'm looking for.
Yep.
So that's a really cool idea to be able to help them by saying thank you for doing that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it serves a public good because you want the really upbeat, high energy teachers to kind of work in these areas to really transform the school systems. I think having loan forgiveness, my personal opinion, politics aside, I think it's a nice sort of reward for these teachers who do work in these systems, because sometimes they can't pay as much, right? Because they don't necessarily have the funding, because the funding's going somewhere else. So, well-to-do towns don't necessarily need it; they can afford it. But I think this is a nice little benefit.
Good.
But would never occur in town Lexington, not low income.
Okay, so I mean, we all know this is a bit of an issue. I mean, I bank Jeanne d'Arc, so I mean, I know I'm covered, but I mean, not just for other banks, but since this is such a big issue, got any tips?
In terms of just the student loans, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that
Yep.
definitely.
Yeah, so today, as the trend goes, there's more and more different ways to pay for school and trying to help pay off the debt. Some of the stories where you hear about students coming out with $100,000, $150,000, and I don't have any research on this, but just from the articles I read, it appears that those students went right through like undergrad to grad to like to doctorate and postdoc or whatever. So I know when I was growing up, the old way was you get your undergrad, you go work for a while, and then you make that company pay for your graduate degree, right? So that's one way to really kind of cut down the debt if you need to go on to graduate school. The other thing, the new trend now is there are services and companies are starting to do this where as a benefit, employee benefit, is they will help their employees make student loan payments up to a certain amount per year. You know, there's different qualifications and stuff, but companies are starting to do that to attract workers because it is such a burden on these new employees, right? Whether it really is in terms of dollar cents or just a psychological burden, it makes a difference. And so companies are starting to help students pay off their loans instead of just handing them the cash, right? So, so that's another way. So if you find companies that do that, then take advantage of that, right?
Absolutely. Jack, I was fortunate enough that I was working in the banking industry that my employers paid for both my undergraduate and my graduate. And like I said, it was just essential because you looked at it, you know, in the reimbursement, you were like, this is just great because otherwise, you know, I couldn't have afforded it. And we think back to when we went to school, Jack.
Yep.
You know, we're a little bit older now.
Yeah.
I mean, but think about where you went, with Texas.
Yep.
How much has it gone up? Probably considerably since you were in school versus nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. I still remember, I tell this story, at the time I went away to college. So I'm a Massachusetts kid, grew up in Massachusetts. It was actually, at the time, it was actually cheaper for me to go to University of Texas out of state than it was actually to go to UMass in-state. I couldn't believe it. But now, it's not even close. I mean, to go to University of Texas out of state, it's huge dollars. I mean, whether you go there, it's on par with private schools, right? So what I was able to do when I was an undergrad, you can clearly not do today because the rates have just gone up dramatically. And some of the sticker prices on some of these colleges, I recently saw one out in California, out in Oregon, I think, $72,000. You gotta be kidding me, $72,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Come on,
Yeah.
who has that kind of cash?
It's like you say, just amazing, the pressure. Jack, any more tips for the college grads? I want to move on to high school students.
So, you know, so one thing you mentioned, I recently read this article about how, you know, college graduates get their new job making however much per year or whatever. The point of this article was that they're really not making that much because the author said, well, you think about how much it costs to even go to work. Transportation, having to buy work clothes, having to
It's
buy lunch
amazing.
when you forget to bring it, and coffee, and you know, get your hair done, or you know whatever it is that you need, right? So if you're making 25 an hour, 30 an hour, whatever that number is, you're really not because you have so many more costs. So look at sort of that top line number, what the salary is, but also understand that it's not really that much because you're gonna have to go buy clothes for work. Right, you can't dress in just ripped jeans or tights or whatever anymore.
Yeah. You bring up a great point, Jack. You know, I've had friends, local to us say, "Hey, I want to work in Boston. I'm going to take the train in every day."
Right.
And then
It's
they
not
look
cheap.
at the cost of the train, the cost of parking, and also, the naiveness to think, well, I arrive at the station at 6:50, and it's a 6:55 train, and at 5 o'clock you're going to run across the street and get on the 505 or whatever
Right,
it is.
right.
But it really is, and like I said, you see a lot of kids coming out of school who don't have, suits or, or clothing that's appropriate,
Right.
and that extra cost of keeping up that wardrobe and stuff
It takes dollars, absolutely.
makes a big deal.
So another one is, I mean, those kids, I mean, sure, they've already off to college, but by now they've already received their financial aid awards. The only question is, what else can they do?
So for high school kids, at this point of year, right, we're almost, we're basically at the beginning of summer. Kids are about to move into their dorms and stuff. So not much you can do this coming year, although you can always still apply for scholarships. And you can apply for scholarships throughout the college career. Right? A lot of times people think of, apply to scholarships to get you into school. And a lot of people don't realize that even when you're a sophomore, junior, and senior, you can still apply for scholarships. Those do exist, right? And also be mindful of other costs, right? So it's not just the tuition, room and board, everything else, but there's transportation costs, and you might want to decorate your dorm room, and and you might not want to, eat in the cafeteria all the time. You might want to go out with your friends. So parents really should be mindful of those other potential costs, because they can really add up, especially if the kid wants to like eat outside the cafeteria, with their friends, right? Or go hit those places where you have beverages once you're of a certain age. That money adds up.
So Jack, one of the questions I had that we've never spoken about is, what's the impact on scholarships on my financial aid? Do they look at that when they're figuring out financial aid, how much scholarships I've received? Does it have an impact one way or the other?
It does. Most of the scholarships that you get, and we're talking about outside scholarships now, right? From outside foundations or whatever, local organizations. There's really a couple different ways they get treated. So what happens is you get a scholarship, right? And you win, and the foundation or whatever sends a check to the school on your behalf, so they know. So some schools, it's no impact, right? So let's say you have a $10,000 gap, you get $10,000 in scholarships. Great, done, right, bills paid.
Yeah.
Other schools, however, you have a $10,000 gap, get $10,000 scholarships. Other schools will actually start pulling back their other financial aid, like start taking away some of the school's own scholarships or loans or work studies, so that, yes, you got $10,000 in outside scholarships, but it only narrowed the gap by, say, $5,000, so you're still on the hook for $5,000. That's quite common. And also, depending where you apply, I'm aware of one foundation that actually grants scholarships to high school seniors, but they pay the money directly to the student, not to the school. So those are the best because that money goes right in your pocket, the school never finds out. So in those cases, obviously, it doesn't affect your financial aid.
Sweet. Another one. This might concern all the parents out there, but this is a very good question. Should parents continue to file for aid?
Yeah, when kids are in school, always, always, always continue to file for financial aid, whether it's the FAFSA form or the profile form. The thing that parents have to watch out for, and sometimes you can't control this, is financial aid is driven primarily by income. And so while that student is in college, let's say they're going out to sophomore year or whatever, and the parent ends up getting a big bonus at work. Or they decide, little Johnny's moved out of the house, so let's downsize a little bit because little Johnny's really not going to be coming home very much. And they end up making a huge gain on their house. Well, that has a gigantic impact on aid. So, that can change what the financial aid is going forward. So you might have gotten a great package for freshman year, but then for sophomore year going forward, it might be terrible because now all of a sudden the school thinks you have all this extra money. Right? So parents really need to kind of watch out for that. So don't sell a house for a huge gain while your kid's in school. Wait till afterwards, right? And that'd be one way to kind of work around that.
Yeah.
Jack, one of the things that you've educated me on in the past that I think is important is, like I said, often people don't even apply for aid at all. You take the approach that, I'm making a lot of money, we're never going to get the aid. That's a mistake, right?
Absolutely. Should always apply for aid, even when people don't think they're going to get it, because applying for aid, you might not get a ton of money, but the schools, particularly privates, have discretion around sort of who they give money to and how much. The aid formula is just that. It's a formula and it's a rule, but that doesn't mean they always have to follow the rule, right? So even if you make $500,000 a year, you should still apply because you can still be eligible for some school-specific programs but in order to sort of be eligible, they needed that financial aid form. And if they never got it from you, they would never look at you for it. So always put something in, even if you don't think you're going to get it.
Jack, another important thing that you've told me about in the past that I really like is people often compare college costs with buying a car.
Right.
So they look at sticker price.
Right.
So you're like, Jack, I love you, son, but we can't afford that $40,000 school. We have to cap it at 30. But often with the financial aid packages in the scholarships, the $40,000 school can be as affordable as a $30,000 school, right?
Correct. I mean, it depends on what the package is, once you put in the financial aid. But, there are instances, and so recently in the local news, there was a senior from Lowell High School who, made the news for sort of panhandling for tuition outside of Target, and ended up doing some online fundraising. I got involved a little bit just to help her out, to help her parents understand, the different award packages and stuff. And it turns out that this young woman, who was very nice, she was accepted at a private school in Vermont and was accepted at UMass. The private school in Vermont, the sticker price was way higher, but once you compared apples to apples, it was actually going to cost her a little bit less if she was going to go to that school in Vermont than if she was going to go to UMass in-state.
But you see that all the time. People just, like you said, they focus only on sticker price.
Exactly.
And that's probably a mistake. So
Exactly.
always apply to your stretch schools, as if you want to call it that.
Yeah, absolutely. Apply the stretch schools, but don't automatically. What I tell people is don't automatically exclude schools just because of sticker, and don't on the flip side, don't automatically include schools just because of sticker, right? Because you never know.
Yep.
Okay, so we're coming a bit down to the wire here. So another question would be is, even though it's late to get aid, like what should high school grads watch out for? I mean, are there any obstacles in the way, or
Yeah, there are, right? Just we talked about some of the extra costs and things, but one of the things is really making sure that the school's a fit. One of the ways that parents end up paying a lot more money is if little Johnny or little Sally go off to school and they find they get homesick or they don't like it or whatever. So by this time, obviously the students have selected, so you want to try and help your child not only stay at the school, because every time you switch you lose credit and you lose money, but also kind of enjoy the major and really figure that out, because again, you switch majors, you might have to retake certain classes, and again, that costs money. So everything you can do is sort of help your son or daughter sort of enjoy their experience and really do what they need to do, keep them focused, and have them graduate in 4 years would be a plus.
So Jack, as we're coming into the summer months, now you have another junior class going into senior year. What are some of the things they should be thinking about, even juniors for that matter, as they start to think about college a little bit more?
Yeah, do a lot of shopping, take the time, visit colleges, go have fun, right? There's 3,000 colleges in the United States. Probably the top 10% of them are the name schools, your BCs, your BUs, your UMasses, whatever. They get almost all of the applications. So that means that there's still another 2,700 schools out there always looking for kids that may be the right fit for you. And I know, like you, Christian, right, being in high school. So encourage you to shop around, go around, look at everything. But at the same time, work with your parents to really understand the rules of financial aid, because it can be so complicated. And so the earlier you plan in advance, understand the rules of that game, and people do say it's a game, the better off you're going to be, and that will set you up to get more aid so that you can go to the school of your choice and not go broke.
Jack, we are out of time. All right, Christian, close the show for us.
All right, well, thanks again, DETV viewers, and I'd like to give a special thanks to Mr. Jack Wang for being on the show today, with a special thanks to the entire DATV crew, and yeah, that's pretty much it. But what can I say? That's just business as usual.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you
Thanks
next
for
time.
watching.